Welcome everyone to Northwest Digital News and Real Estate Savvy. We're going to help you get prepared for buying a home. So if you're thinking about buying a house, and as I mentioned, Susan, in our off-air conversation, that this is really something somebody should be thinking about in advance. Yes. But before we get into all of that, so our viewers know who they're talking to and who's talking to them, Kevin Hunter, Susan Wood, Kyle Torgerson, making all the tech stuff happen here. And so, Susan, just briefly share with people your background in real estate in a little bit so they know they're hearing from somebody who's an expert in the field.
Perfect. So I got into real estate about 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And then I got full-time into real estate it'll be start of my fourth year, October 16th. So very soon. And with that, my career has soared. And I'm probably a good 250 homes now underneath my belt in just those 4 years. So not too bad. And I'm pretty sure I've been through every situation there is, but I'm sure there's more to come. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that has put you into the top rankings among your peers in real estate, hasn't it?
It has. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, very good.
Thank you.
So we just bring the best on the show.
That's right.
All right. So let's share with people about how to properly prepare for a home. And there's a lot of advice out there that people get from online sources or other places they could go to learn how to prepare for a home. But there's a little bit of difference between some of these, shall I call them, expert blogs or postings or whatever, and really what reality is as it comes close to home. Right. There's one thing that I want to mention about real quickly here early on, because we had a little off-air conversation about this, and I know of many people who do this. When thinking about buying a home, they go and pull their own credit and look at their own credit. How much does that really help?
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
At all. No. A lender, period. Nice. A lender will pull it. And that's all that matters. And so oftentimes they will not get the right advice, and they'll get the wrong numbers. Mm-hmm. So a lender looks at both or all three credit agencies. So you have TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian.
Yes.
And so typically they're going to pull the middle one, and they're going to say, yes, this is your credit score. Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes they think that they're going to repair their credit, or they're going to do what they can to up their credit score. And typically a lender will say, no, do this, 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 and this, and this. Mm-hmm. And this is how we can most quickly repair your credit if they have a credit issue. Mm-hmm. So pulling your own credit is really futile unless you're just kind of wondering if certain things have fallen off of your credit. But oftentimes, as we all know, not everything reports to every agency.
Right.
So you can pull from one that'll be there, and you can pull from another, and that one won't be there. And so you really don't ever get the right answer. So,
interestingly enough, for people, when you talk about negative credit history or repairing credit, it is also possible to have a zero credit score.
Yes.
Like a non-existent one.
Absolutely.
And you can be in a situation where you've been in a strong credit position for many, many years.
Yes.
And then don't do anything with credit for like a decade or more. And you probably have to reestablish all of that.
You do not exist.
Yeah, that's right. It's like, who are you and where are you from?
Right.
In a world that is not used to people doing cash business, that's a good thing for people who are in this cash fluid position, however you want to refer to it. It's just a good thing to remember that just keeping the oar out there in the water a little bit with regard to the credit is not a bad idea.
Absolutely. It actually is better to have bad credit than no credit.
Interesting.
I know.
Interesting.
We don't think that. We think, well, I pay cash for everything, and I'm a great credit risk, and that is not how credit agencies at all look at it. When they're going to establish credit or give you credit, they would rather see poor credit than no credit. Mm-hmm. So
let's say somebody goes out, talks to a banker, and my recommendation to them is actually to think about this well in advance. What? Like doing some good planning far enough out. And I think about people having conversations about, well, think of maybe getting into a house, next year, maybe the year after. But most people just invest conversation in that.
Right.
And then 2 years down the road, go, well, it's time. I'm going, wow, you just wasted 24 months of being able to make an amazing credit score, amazing dent in your debt, like all kinds of things. How do you recommend somebody use this time for planning once they start thinking about potentially buying a house?
Well, we tell people to go see a lender first. And a lender will pull your credit, and it's called a soft pull, so it doesn't really affect your credit score. So do a soft pull, and they look at it just for what it is. And if they see things on there that can rapidly improve your score or even get things off of your credit, because I've seen them say, well, don't touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it. It'll fall off here in just a couple months. Let's just wait it out. And that's exactly what happens. So they are the professionals in their own business on how to get you into a home. That's what they do. And so for me, when I think of when somebody comes to me and says, what do I do? Where do I go first? We always say, go talk to a lender. And there's many reasons. Obviously, one, we want to make sure you're qualified. Two, we don't want to bring you into homes and going, oh, wouldn't you love to live in this home? Too bad you don't qualify. It's kind of mean.
Yeah.
So we say, go see a lender, see what you qualify for. Because oftentimes we think, hey, I make $1,200 a house payments, and I can afford $1,200 a month. I've been doing it for a year. But once they pull your credit and once they pull your debt to income ratio, sometimes you don't actually truly qualify for that $1,200 per month. Sometimes you qualify for more, but you're just more comfortable making that $1,200. So that is really where the lender's going to come in and go, okay, here's where you're at. You do qualify for $400,000, but that's going to put you at $3,200 a month. You're like, whoa, no, I don't want that. But where can I pay $1,200 a month? And they'll say, oh, that puts you at about a $210 price range. So then you have an idea of where you're going to be.
So what about these? Because there's a lot of thought processes about growing your credit, improving your credit score. And let's say somebody is thinking ahead about their house purchase. A lot of people, maybe because they're getting the wrong advice, etc., but will go out and do something like buy a car, open up a new credit account at, wherever, Macy's, JCPenney's, all these what I call not essential credit places.
Right.
But anyway, what does all that do to their credit when they do that kind of stuff?
Well, it depends on what they're doing. So if they're trying to build their credit, sometimes that's good. If they have no credit, especially. If they already have a high debt to income ratio, bad idea. And I know oftentimes when we're in the middle of a deal, you'll have somebody that goes, oh my gosh, I need brand new tires. And I have a Les Schwab account, so I just put them on my Les Schwab account, even though it was at zero. They pretty much just kick themselves right out of the field of buying a home, and for about 6 months. So it just really depends upon their debt to income ratio. And revolving credit is the worst credit you can pretty much have.
Right.
And the reason being is it's constantly revolving, and there's never an open-ended door for them. So, or excuse me, there always is an open-ended door for them. It never shuts off, and they only increase it. And let's face it, in today's world, if you have a high credit amount, it's like, oh, I can take a trip to Hawaii for $2,000. I got a credit card for $10,000. What's the big deal? Well, it's a huge deal if you're trying to buy a house.
Exactly.
So don't use your credit.
So what the lender should be advising, so if somebody goes out, they start to have this conversation about buying a house, they go visit with a lender, lender pulls their credit. One of the things that the lender should be advising is, hey, stay away from these spur of the moment purchases or major purchases or that kind of thing.
And we had a young lady not that long ago. She was going to get married, her and her fiance, and they were on the home stretch, 7 to 10 days from closing, and they decided they wanted to go buy their wedding rings because they were getting married, and they wanted to purchase the home before they got married. And they were getting married in, I think it was 10 or 14 days. It wasn't very long. So I thought, oh, we're going to go out and buy these rings, and we're days from closing. And the lender's like, and we're like, oh my gosh. So they had to go borrow the money from, I believe it was her parents, to pay off those rings immediately because they were out of the running to buy that home. So even a small, I don't know how expensive these rings were, but even a small purchase, it just depends on where you are on that credit line. If you could afford a couple $100s and it's not going to affect you, great. But if you can't and you are already teetering, you stay far, far away from credit as possible until you close. The day you close and you sign, then you can. I mean, the day. But you better record.
It's kind of been this, when you're talking about teetering, if you are teetering, you don't want to start adding stones on one side to just see what happens. Not a good idea. Well, I think what a lot of people are not aware of, perhaps, and they can get advice by, the proper advice by working with the right people to begin with. But I think sometimes you don't realize it. You go out and, as an example, visit with your own lender. You can even get what is referred to as a pre-approval.
Correct.
Which you need to have that even in your shopping
By minimum.
process. Yeah. So you have this pre-approval, and then in the days before closing, you go and do this again. I think what people don't know is that the credit gets pulled again.
Multiple times throughout
Yes.
your transaction, including the day of closing.
Right.
So the day that you close, they pull your credit and they call your company that you work for. They always call your employer to make sure you're still employed with that company.
Wow.
And it's not like a car where you can go, oh, I'm quitting my job tomorrow, so I'm going to buy a car today. It's nothing like that. So they literally pull your credit, approximately, depending on how many months go by. Typically it's 30 days to 45 days to close a home. So they will have pulled it at least 4 times.
What can people do relative to budget? One of the common pieces of advice for people planning for home is know something about your budget. What advice would you give to people about that?
Well, I'd like to actually take a different direction with that.
Sure.
So most people don't understand really what it takes to buy a home. It's like, what do I need to come out of my own pocket? And all the time we deal with, what is the difference between closing cost and the money that's expected to come down that your lender wants you to put down, your down payment. So your down payment is something that comes out of your pocket. It could be 3%, 5%, 10%, whatever you want, up to 20%. Anything less than 20%, you're gonna have to pay what they call PMI, which is an insurance. And in a conventional lending, that will fall off after 22% of equity in your home. In an FHA lending, it never falls off. You actually have to refinance your home to get out of that PMI. So yeah, and a lot of people don't know that. They think, oh, it's automatically going to fall off. It does not, only conventional. So the other thing that comes out of your pocket is the earnest money. But if you buy the home, you put that earnest money towards your down. Or sometimes if it's FHA or VA, sometimes you'll get it back if the sellers are paying your closing. So that oftentimes may come back to you after you close. Or like I said, it goes towards your down. The other thing you would have to come up with is approximately 10 days to 2 weeks, you're expected to have an inspection. And that is going to be anywhere from $450 down. It depends on the size of your home. If you're buying a duplex or triplex or the like, obviously it's going to be more. But a typical, just a standard home, you're about $450 or less. I think the cheapest I've ever seen is $375 for a 600 square foot home, but still.
Right.
And then you have your appraisal. Your appraisal varies on your location of your home, and that is through your lender. Your lender contacts what we call an AMC, which is an appraisal management company. So we can be as far away from that appraisal as possible, so there's no hint of any coercion going on there. So they hire somebody, they put it up on a board, somebody agrees to take it, and they say, this is how much I'm going to charge you for that. Then the buyer pays the bank or the lender, and sometimes that comes out at closing, sometimes it does. It just depends on your lender and how they have that set up. So the money out of your pocket is your earnest money, your inspection money, and your appraisal money, and those are to be expected. And so outside of that, if your lender says you don't have to come in with anything down, like for a VA and sometimes FHA, or the seller's paying part of that closing cost, you have to come in with nothing. But the closing costs can run you approximately $6,500 on top of whatever else you're putting down. So they are two different dogs, and most people don't understand that. Oh, well, I'm putting 5% down. Doesn't that include my closing? No, they're totally different. So those closing costs are, let's see, you have your title insurance, your title recording fees, primarily a lot of title things, the taxes that are owed on the home from the point that you take possession to the end of the tax time. And let's see, there's another fee, and I apologize. So there's all these little small fees, and those are what's inclusive of those closing costs. So you have down and you have closing, totally different. So if you're looking to buy a home, 1, you want to talk to a lender, see what you qualify for. 2, they're going to tell you if you need to bring anything down. And 3, are you going to need the seller's help for those closing costs? Do you really have that money sitting in the bank? So
Let's just use a kind of a middle of the line house, and let's say somebody's looking at something that's $250,000. Maybe I'm way off the mark with saying that's a middle of the line house, but
a little bit.
That's kind of what I think. So let's a $250,000 house or $200,000. If somebody's going, hey, I'm trying to save up money for down payment, for closing costs, etc.
Right.
Just a rough guess. If somebody came and said, I have X number of dollars in the bank, at what point do you think somebody's ready to have that conversation? What's the cash number somebody needs to be shooting for?
Again, it depends upon the lending. I think all of us, anybody who's really done real estate for a while now, you literally can put somebody into a home for nothing down, except for their appraisal money and inspection and earnest money. So they're coming in with nothing. So it really depends. It depends also on your comfort level. So when you move into a home, we all know there's added expenses. You got to turn on your water, your electricity. So there's the moving cost, all of that. I think psychologically you have to be more prepared than financially. And so oftentimes we'll see a huge upturn at the first of the year because everybody's getting their tax returns. I've got $5,000, I'm going to buy a house. And you really can. And ironically enough, you really can buy a house with $5,000 within reason. You know, you can buy a $300,000, $350,000 house, typically speaking, unless you qualify for that. So there's guidelines for what you qualify for, what you don't qualify for, and then how much money is going to be required for you to put down.
Let's talk about credit score a little bit. There's a low water mark that you're shooting for. Hopefully people are over the given number.
Right.
And on a somebody who has been working with a lender or maybe working on their own to maximize their credit score in preparation for buying a house, what should they be shooting for?
642.
642.
Yeah, that's the magical number right now. 642 is typically your bare minimum, and that puts you pretty much to qualify for anything except for conventional. Well, conventional you kind of qualify for that with money down or anything like that, but with 642 you can do your FHA and you can do your Washington State bond or the first time home buyers courses, and that pretty much puts you into a home. So 642 is really what you're shooting for.
So let's say somebody's at 6.25 or they're at 600 and they're going, I'm close, just need to get over that. Are there things that you would recommend they do to help bolster that?
Well, like we talked off air, you can go get a credit card that's secured and kind of bump that up in a rapid way. The other way is, again, speak to your lender. They will direct you. That is their job. If they're a good lender, they will direct you exactly how to get that done. Typically speaking, most people go, oh, I'm going to go to my bank. My bank's going to, I've been there for 30 years. I love my bank. I bought my car through my bank. Car and homes are two different things. And so when I say speak to a lender, I'm talking a lender. A lender, that's what they do. That's the only way they get paid. Somebody at a bank, even though they're amazing at their job and can lend on homes, they still make whatever they make per hour, and they really don't care whether or not your house closes or doesn't close. But just like a realtor, we do, because that's the only way we get paid. So a
lender you're referring to as somebody whose specialty is actually the housing market.
Lending, absolutely lending. Right. Right.
Yeah.
You wouldn't go see a podiatrist for a root canal.
That's correct.
So kind of how I look at it.
Unless you misunderstand where the roots are.
Possibly.
My tooth aches all the way down to my finger. All right. Well, cool. Visiting about, is there anything that people need to know relative? Are there any other longer term strategies for somebody who has a year or 2 years to look for buying a house? Is there anything that you would recommend they do relative to credit or keep their credit score strong? Keep their credit score strong.
If you're a 1 or 2 year out and you can really put yourself on a budget, obviously the better your credit score is, the better your opportunity is for the type of lending that you receive. And the more money you can come in with, maybe you can buy a bigger home that you really, really want, and you have more money to put towards that home, and you only qualify for this much, but you can come in with the rest with cash. That's amazing. And we have people who's like, well, I don't want my significant other to work, so I know I've got to be within this budget. But if you've got that money sitting there, you can still buy the home that you want and be outside of your real buying power because you've got the cash to put it down.
Let's visit about real estate agents, because at some point in this whole process of planning, you need to get an agent involved. When?
Immediately. Buyer's agents are free to buyers. And so that is kind of a misnomer. We get questions all the time. How do you get paid? Who pays you? And so for buyers, we're free. Why wouldn't you use us? Why would you use the selling agent? It's always my question.
Right.
Even as a selling agent, I won't dual end. I just don't. It's not what I do. And it's okay if other people do. It's just my personal thing. I want to be able to represent one party fully and strongly, period. So as a buyer's agent, you can go get another agent and they're free to you. And they're going to absolutely 100% stick by your side and protect you and do what they're supposed to do. Where a selling agent is supposed to do that with the seller. They're their priority. And so do you want to be second?
I see where this conflict or potential for conflict can come into play with somebody being both a buyer and a seller's agent, because I am aware of situations that have happened where that is the same person sitting at the table. And you're just like, wow, does justice really, if that's the proper word, does representation actually truly happen to the level that it could for each of the parties? Well, that's an impossible thing to have happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely, especially if there's a conflict between the buyer and seller, and your job is to do the best to keep everybody off the rails. And if you're representing both sides, it makes that a little bit impossible without teetering in one direction or the other. So again, I just don't put myself in that position. I don't think it's a healthy position for anybody. Even as a seller, I'd be like, well, wait a second. So you're going to represent this person over here too. So how do I know that you're not telling them things that I've told you, that I'll take a less price? So that's the scary part about that, is if you have a seller who says, okay, I want $325,000 for my home, but I'd be okay with $298,000. All of a sudden the buyer comes in and goes, oh, I'm offering $298,000. What's the seller going to think? He's going to think you ratted him out.
Yeah, exactly.
And you did it. You may not have. But at the same time, I don't ever want that conflict of interest. So again, buyers, agents are free to buyers, and I couldn't imagine why I wouldn't use one. I mean, obviously I bought a home before I was a real estate agent. I used an agent that represented me. And I hear people say, well, I call the person on the sign because, they know more. Yes and no. They know as much as what's written down on the paper as the person reading the paper from the buying side. So there's a lot of misnomers that are never found out. And again, I would want somebody to dig in for me and maybe offend the seller by asking certain questions that the selling agent would not ask because it's their client.
This is maybe to a lesser extent, but I think a little bit of calling the person on the sign is a little bit like walking into a car dealer and going, hey, what do I qualify for? Right. They can make anything work for you that isn't necessarily in your best interest. Right. So just really, the advice that I give to people, even on that side, is to make sure you do your homework. And I'm not going to go into all of that, but give them all these different things of doing their homework and being prepared. So the day they walk onto that car lot, they actually know the answers to all of those questions. Right. So great advice there. As far as shopping for homes, you recommend that people get out and see a number of different houses that are in that so-called range, or what do you think?
I think that depends upon the person. So you can do that if you're looking for something that's very, very particular. But at the same time, for us, I would prefer you, and not because I'm lazy, but because I'm not seeing things through your eyes. So if you have a vast variety of things you're looking for, it's best for you to go out and kind of view the homes on the outside first, because you very well may not like the neighborhood or what's going on there. So you don't want to drag somebody around that doesn't want to see homes that they don't want to see. And then you've set up appointments for those homes, and now you got to call the seller and say, or the selling agent, oh, we're not going to see that home now because of whatever reason. So a lot of that stuff can be alleviated just by doing their own homework. Pre-internet, that's kind of how it worked. Right. They drove around and they seen homes. They said, oh, I like this home. And again, it's not because you're being lazy. It's you don't always see things through other people's eyes. And something that I had a gentleman didn't want to live on a certain street because it was his ex-wife's name. And he refused to look at the house. He loved the house, but he refused to look at the house because the name was Evelyn. And I was like, well, okay, but that's his thing. So who am I to question why he didn't want to look at the house? But so it's always better to also do your own homework. I mean, we work for you, but we're not the ones going to be living there. So.
So this is a little bit of a digression, but I have to tell you a funny story about somebody shopping for homes. It's a good idea to go and do a little bit of this advanced legwork on your own, not necessarily wasting the time of an agent per se to do that aspect of it if you want to just go and check out neighborhoods and that sort of thing. But there was a really funny story that somebody shared with me. This is actually in the city of Detroit, or one of the suburb areas. So if you know a little bit about the crime rate around Detroit, Michigan, you might know where this is going. But anyway, so the person is out home shopping, and a home right on the same block was having a new roof put on it. There's 3 roofers up on the roof putting shingles on, and one of the guys is wearing a pistol on his belt. Besides a tool belt, he's wearing a pistol on his belt. And just out of curiosity, the guy sees it, and not that this is like this huge deal, but he goes over there and, hey, do you mind asking? I mean, how's the neighborhood? He goes, I pack heat when I'm on the roof because people come by, take our ladders down, completely clean out our trucks, and there's nothing we can do to stop them. He goes, somebody comes and touches my ladder, they're going to have a problem. I was like, we maybe don't want to live in this neighborhood. And so it was a really hilarious story, but not that people are going to encounter that sort of thing, but if you don't go look, how are you ever going to know?
You're never going to know. And it's also good to go look at different times of the day. Mm-hmm. So maybe at night, see what's kind of going on down there, how loud it is during school hour, not during school hour, on the weekends. Mm-hmm. So
I actually had somebody who was considering buying a home in a neighborhood that I lived in, and they stopped. The house is for sale up the street. They stopped at my place because it's out front, and they said, hey, how do you like the neighborhood and stuff like that? And I was just like, you know, there's a lot of nights my garage door is up. I mean, my vehicles are out here. Sometimes I have tools on the porch. I've never had a thing ever stolen since I've been living here. And they're like, it's exactly what we wanted to hear. So you can learn those kinds of things from not only looking at the homes in the neighborhoods you're thinking of, but by asking neighbors. And in that case, he got some advice and he really appreciated it. But I thought that was pretty smart of them to even come and ask the question.
Oh, yeah. Or even to call your local police department.
Yeah.
What kind of actions happened here? Because the last thing you want to buy is a house in a beautiful neighborhood that maybe was a drug dealing house. And all of a sudden you have all these vagabonds in the middle of the night ringing your doorbell thinking that Mr. Drug Dealer still lives there. So, I mean, it happens everywhere. So absolutely do your own due diligence.
Well, for everybody in our listening audience, I hope you're hearing in the overall presentation. Go out and do your homework. Talk to a lender beforehand. Don't go make any big purchases in the middle of doing your home shopping. Get a real estate agent involved early because you get free advice, just like you got from Susan here today. You get free advice by getting an agent involved early. And it's like anything else that you go out there and do. And in this case, we're talking about the single largest purchase most people ever make.
Right.
Do your homework.